I am Dee Nichols. I'm from Memphis.
My name is Taylor Jones. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio.
My name is Mikhail Solomon. I am from Miami, Florida.
I'm Pascal Sablan. I'm from New York, Queens more specifically.
My name is Shelda Joseph. I'm from Haiti.
My name is Tanit. I was born and raised in Ethiopia in Addis Ababa, which is the capital city of Ethiopia.
My name is Josephia Rouse. I am originally from South Carolina.
My name is Michelle Lisa Policy. I'm currently based in Miami, but I'm born and raised in Palm Beach.
My name is Naja Moon. I'm originally from Durham, North Carolina.
My name is Aria Hill, and I am an architectural designer and a creative director. I am from Virginia. My family is actually from the Caribbean, so a lot of my work deals with decolonization, post-colonial, and also cultural computation.
My name is Dr. Moya Bailey. I am an assistant professor at Northeastern University in Boston. I am in the Africana Studies program and the Women's Gender and Sexualities program.
I'm a nurse. I've done med-surg, tele, emergency room, and right now I'm traveling.
I am a product inclusion UX researcher at YouTube. And my research focuses on the experiences of Black creators and the ways in which technology products influences their online presentation of self.
I am the director of Prism Art Fair, which is one of the leading art fairs in the country celebrating African and African diaspora contemporary art.
I am an associate principal at AJ Associates in New York. I'm also the president of the National Organization of Minority Architects, which I'll refer to as NOMA. I'm a founder of an advocacy organization called Beyond the Built Environment.
What I do is like the intersection between policy, advocacy, history, and narrative change.
I am a family law attorney. I own my own firm. It's called Divorce with a Plan.
I would describe myself, I was as a scientist and an engineer in the field of artificial intelligence. And I have a nonprofit called the Distributed AI Research Institute.
So I'm a visual artist, and a lot of my practice is focused on like nostalgia, trying to use my experiences to speak on like bigger issues. And so like now I'm at the Black Reconstruction Collective, which is a refreshing change from the places I've worked before, which have been typically majority white.
Have you ever felt overlooked or marginalized as a Black woman within your field? Could you share some experiences? This could include being gaslighted, microaggressions, tone policing.
So I've been told in so many ways that architecture wasn't for me.
My second week of architecture school, I was in an architecture history class, and the professor asked two of us to stand in a classroom of maybe 60 students and said, okay, these two will never become architects because they're Black and because they're women.
My first job, I was the only Black nurse on the floor. I usually get patients who refuse my services.
Because of the path that I took, it made it easier to exploit me in terms of pay for certain opportunities. I tended to just go with the status quo.
Once I did get something out of one of my coworkers' desks on like a Saturday. There was a lot going on where we were all of a sudden getting paid with paper checks. And then like I reached out to my coworker, I was like, hey, can I like grab such and such out of your desk? And they're like, yeah, my key is over here. I grabbed a key, unlock it, and it was just their check just sitting on top. That was almost double what I was making. And I cried because when that person had been hired, it was just after a lot had happened, and I had asked for a raise and I was denied a raise. They deserved their salary, but I deserved my salary that I desired.
In every single classroom discussion, I'm always hyper cognizant of like, how am I coming off? Because there's just been several times where things that come from a place of passion, especially when you're talking about like issues of justice, issues of equity, as a Black woman is always like viewed as coming from a place of anger.
There's been times where if I try to propose something to a funder, if I send in a male representative afterwards to have the same conversation, he would be more successful than I would be.
Because I was often the youngest in the room, I think people would gaslight me in the sense of making me think that I was insignificant or hadn't had enough experience to add expertise into a space. I've had to often ignore like those types of social cues, especially from white males in a room, and just like really show up, like really carry a presence about myself, where it's like, don't F with me. I'm here for a reason, and I'm not gonna apologize for being here.
In the beginning with the microaggressions, with your hair, with your clothes from Black people in the profession, to now when it's comments from male white attorneys about how much money did I make? Oh, you made more money than me.
I had people squeeze my hair and say, wow, how fluffy it is. I've also had to kind of have also a self-recognition in this moment, which was my hair revolution, where I used to wear my hair consistently, persistently straight. I kept identifying myself as beautiful through that identity of a more European idealization of what beauty is. And it wasn't until I was thinking about expanding our family and having a child, and I was like, well, how can I ask my child to love themselves exactly as they are if I go through such extreme lengths to change and alter who I am? I recall having a lecture, during the end, when this young girl started crying and she said, oh my God, I spent an hour in the bathroom earlier flat ironing my hair so I could be professional at this conference. And you standing up there in your curly crown saying like, this is professional, broke me, because that is definitely something that I struggle with every day.
I'm really happy that I heard the term misogynoir, because that captures that you get it not just from white people. There's also Black men, and sometimes Black women, just like white women, can be sexist, right? Black women can be part of the system too. There have been Black men who have plagiarized my work, and even work related to like equity and justice, right? I started to be very loud about attributing my name to my work, and I also I encourage a lot of other people to do that. Not be territorial, be extremely collaborative.
I think if there were more females supporting each other, especially us, guiding each other to where it needs to be, because if you don't support each other at work, who's going to support one another?
How other parts of your identity, in addition to being a Black woman, has changed the way that you claim space in your field.
Being a first generation student, being from a blue collar background, is to me like extremely important to how I operate in any space. I'm able to talk not only about some of the racial challenges that exist when we talk about policy, but also the classism that exists when we talk about policy.
A few times, you hear the patients asking you, what's that accent? Where are you from? What school did you attend? You always feel as if you need to improve, be better, so that you'll be a little bit more accepted.
I've been wrestling a lot with how I show up as a Black lesbian woman by not shying away from exhibiting all sides of myself. That gives somebody else in the room the liberty or the space to perhaps do the same. And so bringing those intersections, bringing those other identities, in my opinion, only helps to better inform the work.
And I think really the identity part that really has transformed the way I think about space in the profession was truly becoming a mother. I have been known to and infamous for bringing my son everywhere. In the beginning, I thought I had to subdivide my personalities and only give a percentage of who I am, potential spaces and positions and roles. But in actuality, what I've realized is that I need to bring 100% of who I am to every position.
In regard to conversation about different parts of our identities, do you think being a Black woman and your profession can be separated?
I don't feel the need to ever disentangle like being Black from my career, just because there are not enough of us. But I also think the perspective that I have of like being doubly marginalized and experiencing some of the worst elements of the policymaking process is critical. And to try to discount that, to me, does a disservice to all of the things that have made me who I am and have allowed me to enter the policymaking world with bolder solutions and with this framework about what can reparations look like and what does equity look like?
So I think the goal is to make them unrelated, but for right now, I think they have to be.
I do stick out as a Black female entrepreneur who is successful, but I also note that I personally, I'm not going to define myself as that. I'm going to define myself as someone who is going to work hard, not for how that is looked at or seen in my local community, but how I want my legacy to be, not based on society standard.
I tried to do that for a while because I thought that I'd be boxed. And like I said, they do anyways. They say like, oh, like she's the activist or whatever. But at some point I was like, well, this is part of my identity that's important to me. And it's not just my identity, it's that I see the things differently because of it. I just started leaning into that more. I don't want to perpetuate harm to my own people just because I don't want to be pigeonholed.
I've struggled with this because my research has been in intersection between form and mathematics and architecture. And then I've also been interested in this work of decolonization and post-colonial imaginaries for the Caribbean. They're always kind of felt like, oh, this is one thing and this is the other. But I've recently just realized that no, these can be and are intrinsically linked together. And I think, I can do both.
How can institutions or groups outside of Black women work to dismantle misogynoir within your field? What could make your field more inclusive, exposure, cost of education, and what is your field doing that is or isn't working to address that?
I think on a micro scale, like on an interpersonal scale, is speaking up. I think it comes down to people educating themselves enough about the different types of disparities and exclusions that happen to Black women and Black people at large, to be able to identify when they are happening and then speak up and push back on the powers that be.
The moderate, quote unquote, moderate people need to step up. Those people who they see something and they're like at the end later on come to you and they're like, oh, that was bad, I'm sorry. Like, no, don't tell me that. That does not help me that right now. Speak up right then.
From an academic perspective, since I'm a student right now, I think constantly about all the barriers to entry that exist at the Kennedy School, whether that be the $750 fee you have to pay to enroll, which is crazy, the $100 fee you have to pay to even apply, which is higher than most other graduate schools that I applied to. There are just so many barriers.
This is all economic. The road to accessing inclusivity comes from us being able to pay for resources to make sure we educate more young Black designers. Architecture and design are probably the most expensive fields to study.
I can sometimes be seen as too radical, I guess, but I fully think that there should be a freeze on hiring any white people in the arts. If you're in an institution that has 90% white people, especially if you're in a neighborhood or in a city like Miami that's majority people of color, you shouldn't be allowed to hire any more white people. If you're a grant funder who is funding programming and then you see that they serve 90% white people in a neighborhood that is 70% Black, they shouldn't be given funding anymore until they learn how to serve their community.
Companies and teams have to find and figure out more non-performative ways to call out issues within their industry.
Racism is seen as more of a character flaw than it is being seen as a tool, a system.
There's a current push that we as Black women should save or fix the problems, or Blacks, right, with diversity and things of that nature, when people are just using these situations to kind of highlight us and to then dissect what is acceptable as being racist and what is not, and allowing themselves to kind of continue to control the narrative.
It's been a little over a year ago now. I had a public work at the Bass Museum in Miami Beach that ended up being vandalized and then a second time destroyed. The vandalizing included racial slurs, homophobic slurs. It was very violent in its language. I ended up taking on a lot of the labor of addressing this situation publicly. And I think a lot because the museum was unequipped and didn't know how. And in that process learned that, there was only one Black woman on their entire board. There was one gay man on their board who ended up writing like an op-ed that was published in the paper. He never spoke to me. And so it was interesting to see how these decisions were made about how we stand up for this Black queer woman within a space where they had no Black queer women to reach out to me or to even provide some kind of understanding in their own behind closed doors conversations.
So throughout history, we've seen how Black women have been pushed aside and ignored despite huge contributions to different important historical events. We see this in Black Lives Matter movement today, where this movement was started by Black women to highlight police brutality against the Black community. But the majority of the narrative has been pushing the idea that only Black men are victims of this, when in reality, Black women like Breonna Taylor are facing these same struggles. Another example is the suffrage movement, where Black women were pushed to the sidelines and written out of history, while white women became the sole faces of this movement. With these contexts in mind, how do you think we can combat our own erasure, and how can we amplify our overlooked voices?
I'm teaching this year. There's this kind of our expectation that like, okay, if you're taking art history in X grade, you have to know about these artists. And I'm like, I didn't go to art school. Art is all I do. It's my life. I'm a working artist, and I don't know who that person is. What would it mean to teach instead about Augusta Savage, to replace this lesson with a Black woman? And so thinking about these small opportunities to introduce different folks to people.
When I was in undergrad and people would talk about certain historical periods, like the Civil Rights Movement, for example, making a conscious decision to not talk exclusively about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Bayard Rustin and John Lewis, but to talk about the Ella Bakers, the Fannie Lou Hamers of that moment is critically important.
I would say we need to own the narratives. Talk about us being historians, us claiming our greatness, because we are our first line of erasing ourselves, because we've been conditioned to do so. And when we think about erasure, it's not a passive action. There is an active voice, someone in a group, in an entity, in an energy that is strategically editing us out.
Even as I'm thinking about erasure, I'm also thinking about our intentional silences. Like, I do think in the social media moment, there can be too much or oversharing that can occur. I want some of the things that are from our community to remain ours. So I am also thinking about the balance between the erasure of our contributions that we do want to be public and that are essential to understanding our contributions in the world, and the things that perhaps we want to be more selective about sharing with people who are outside of our communities.
If there's any advice that you can give to young Black women, what would that advice be?
There's so many people that will look at a young Black girl and tell her why she can't, who will really, really seek to like humble her before they ever encourage her. So not telling myself no is super important, but also to always ask for more secondarily to that.
Find your community and try to create it.
Make advocating for yourself like part of your routine and like make it habitual.
To not let imposter syndrome fuel your whole experience.
There are a lot of us. Find some joy in doing the digging and discovering folks that have been on the path that you're on already. We've been blessed with a lot of trailblazers. It's a myth that you can't go where you want to go.
You have so much light in you, and the world will try to diminish that light, but don't let them.